A few years ago, I made a documentary about class.
That's the system, and unfortunately, we can't change it.
It got a pretty big response. People wrote to me from all over the country, telling me about the class barriers they had faced, and asking, what should we do about it? In this series, I want to answer that question.
What have you tried to do to break into these professions?
I've been meeting working class students who fear their background might hold them back in their dream career.
It is worrying that I might not be the traditional barrister.
I sort of feel like the accent that I've got sounds a bit stupid.
And asking, do they need to change themselves to get the jobs they want?
It's almost about how you try and rig the players within it to be successful within it.
It's very difficult to change your accent.
Or is it time to change the way we fill our top jobs in Britain?
Could making class a protected characteristic stop unfair discrimination against some of the poorest people in our society?
How do I know if they care about this stuff?
They have to care, because this stuff is important.
How can young people break into Britain's elite?
Right, let's do it.
Morning.
Have you had a good period too?
Morning, young man. Morning, young man. Good to see you.
How was your day going?
My day was very good, thanks. How was your day? Very good to see you. Good morning, sir. Very good to see you.
I'd been invited to visit an East London secondary school.
I don't think I've ever been asked, how's your day been, by a 12-year-old. This school is different.
Cumberland School is in Newham, where half of children live in poverty. They've devised their own way to hack the system.
Oh yeah, nice man.
Year 11s are encouraged to apply for sixth form places at some of Britain's most elite private schools via the prestigious colleges programme.
So what I would firstly like to say is congratulations, you are 12 of the 30 that have successfully made it onto the prestigious college programme.
The fees for these exclusive boarding schools can be as much as £46,000 a year, nearly twice the national average salary. So the school helps students win scholarships through a programme of coaching.
So we're going to start off with one of my favourite topics to teach, and that's deportment. Deportment is all about your posture. So can we firstly put our arms by our sides, because they should really be beside you. Next thing, your chin should be parallel to the floor, okay? Would anyone like to try placing a book on their head to show? Okay. Could we have a book, please? Yes. And Amol would like a book as well. And we can try. And you can all do this at home. Okay. Well done. Well done. So can you see that her chin is up? And that's the posture you really need. So practice at home, walking up and down. Would you like to try? Okay. Well done. Good.
Sorry. A bit nervous.
Okay.
Sorry.
Nailed the walking. Next, how to sit like a royal.
A very nice etiquette lady, she calls this the Duchess slant, which the Duchess of Cambridge uses quite a lot because she's quite tall. But just remember again, you need to keep your spine straight. So you can cross to the right or to the left, it's up to you, as long as the knees and ankles are together. Okay? Move your legs in. They shouldn't be out there. How's everybody finding that? You feel uncomfortable? Okay, so that's the idea to practice, because these are things that can help you with interviews and when you're meeting people and things like that.
I felt a bit uncomfortable too. I caught up with the students afterwards.
How did you find that etiquette lesson?
I can understand the whole purpose behind it, to seem kept and tidy.
How do you feel about the fact that you're being asked to fit in with the upper class?
I mean, we've kind of been taught this stuff, and that the idea that we need to work 10 times harder because of our backgrounds and where we're from. And so we're kind of used to it, but I still think if you can't beat them, join them, the system especially, seeing as there's so many systematic issues within our society. And so if we want to progress, we need to just go that way.
Oof, that's depressing. I wondered what the head had to say.
We've had a lot of success. We had 20 students last year who
managed to secure a place in these prestigious colleges.
Full scholarships?
Yeah, one of our students who went to one of these colleges has actually become the head girl in that college, which is an amazing thing because it demonstrated that if we prepare them for these situations, that they can adapt and they're confident.
Do you feel a little bit like kind of, you've got to skirt, there's a fine line between making your pupils the best version of themselves or just teaching them to be posh people? Do you worry about that?
Not necessarily. I don't worry about it because the class that you've referred to, it's somebody we've hired in at the request of some of our students in the last year. We can't resolve the ills of society. What we can do is prepare our students to navigate through these difficult situations. And if we don't prepare them, who will? Is it going to be their parents? Maybe there is some parents who will be able to do it. But I can tell you honestly, they don't have the tools to do that. No one's shown them how to do it. And this class thing can sometimes be, it's like a vicious circle.
I admired the school's honesty, and it's clearly a successful approach. But doing an etiquette class in order to get into a private school feels like an admission of defeat. What about the working class students who haven't had this kind of training? Are there any other ways to break through the class ceiling?
Lauren, it's so nice to meet you.
So nice to meet you too.
American academic Lauren Rivera has observed elite recruitment firsthand in the US and UK.
I would say knowing the rules of the game can definitely be an asset in playing by them. And so in my research, what I found is that the way that employers evaluate and define merit systematically skews the playing field in competition for these elite jobs towards students with the most privileged backgrounds. However, I also did find that there were some pathways through which individuals from less privileged socioeconomic backgrounds could successfully break into these occupations.
Tell me about some of these tricks that you should start thinking about if you want to get in.
I prefer to think of them as pathways. Not all of them are fully within our control. The first way that people from non-elite backgrounds can enter elite occupations, from what I observed, was mimicry. Fancy way of saying, just put on an act and pretend to be posh. One person I interviewed, I remember he said it was a law student who did not come from an elite background, but his best friend had grown up in, all of his life talking to elites. He had gone on to all the schools. And so he just pretended to be his best friend. He just went all deep acting, right? And said, in every interaction, I would just pretend. I would say, WWSD, what would Simon do?
I was on my way to York University to meet second-year student Chris.
I've got the bells just in time for us. Mate, have you got time for a bit of lunch?
Yeah.
I booked the most ludicrous-looking tapas place. Do you like a bit of tapas?
Do you know what? I've never eaten tapas. I don't even know what it is.
He was studying electronic engineering and targeting top jobs in the civil service.
Tell me a bit about where you grew up and what it was like.
It was an interesting place to grow up. Where I was in Hull was all poor, so no one had anything, so you weren't really comparing to anyone else, and you didn't really feel judged for that. I know originally we didn't have beds and stuff like that, but we was lucky. We had mattresses on the floor basically at one point, but someone from the church gave us some beds, some furniture and that type of stuff. I don't know, I pictured myself winning the lottery or something and getting out of there when I was a kid.
Did you always think of uni as your escape route?
No. So I didn't think I'd go to university. I finished school, I didn't try my GCSEs and stuff like that because I thought, what's the point? I've seen the people before me, my brothers, neither of them have gone through education, done anything well with it. So I guess I didn't think it was for me. So when I left school, I ended up going into work instead. I had a few jobs and then I ended up getting a night shift job in York, working at Port Cabin. So do you know Portaloos, Port Cabins, that type of thing?
Did many people from your school go to uni?
There's two people I know of. One of them went to Lincoln.
Two people from your whole year group at school that went to uni?
Yeah.
So you are incredibly exceptional.
It's all by a bit of chance because I didn't start considering it by myself. I met someone who was actually a student at the uni, and they inspired me to sort of change. So over time, they started to tell me that they were from the same type of background. It sort of gave me that confidence to and maybe start pushing for that. So I started doing my GCSEs while I was working still.
Where are you at in terms of job applications? You're still only in your second year, right?
Yeah, I'm sending off applications now for like trying to get summer internships.
Where?
I got like a civil service rejection last week or the week before. Yeah, I guess that was sort of a shock, like, and it's like the fact of not knowing why you didn't get it. So I'm sort of now trying to figure out where it went wrong.
There's one thing Chris is particularly concerned about.
You watch the media, like TV, and they always say, like, if you've got a northern accent, you're so much less likely to get into these things. That's going to sort of pull you back. Like, I sort of feel like the accent that I've got sounds a bit stupid. There's been times when I've sort of watched YouTube videos of how to speak clear, and you do like little exercises and stuff like that.
What are the techniques they try and recommend?
There's one that's got me saying around the word and trying to think where it was now. I think it was watermelon. I just had to say watermelon so many times. You know, just trying to really pronounce stuff.
Why do we need to say watermelon according to your little videos on YouTube?
It sounds stupid now that I'm talking about it, but it's to make yourself sound as sort of intelligent, or like, you know, if you're at a job interview and you're speaking exactly the same as the person that's interviewing you so that they can understand, like, you're pronouncing it and they're not like sort of picking up on the point you've got a really strong accent or anything.
But why should you have to change to be more like them? Why can't they change to be more like you?
Because they're already there. I guess that's the issue.
It is pretty gutting, to put it mildly, that Chris feels that the way he speaks makes him sound stupid. And I feel instinctively and very strongly that you shouldn't have to, and he shouldn't have to, mimic a posh accent to get the kind of job that he wants. And at the same time, I know that there is a pretty strong association in this country between sounding posh and being thought of as clever. So what do I say to the guy?
Unfortunately, some vandals have sworn all over my car again.
Vandals, eh, Mr. Paige, you know? Makes me wonder what it's all about.
What? That was just a noise.
In the UK, accent is a particularly strong signifier of class and class divisions.
Hiya. What do you call yous then? See, I'm going to have my handful with you pair of takes, aren't I?
Mummy, what's she saying? I don't know, Claire, but she sounds awfully angry, so don't provoke her in any way.
Our biases are a target of some great British comedy.
Have you read Stephen Fry's new book? No, but I'm longing to. I simply adored Moab as my washpot.
Are these attitudes reflected in elite professions? Time to meet some people who really know what they're talking about.
I'm Amol. How you doing?
Hi, I'm Devyani.
Very, very nice to meet you.
Hi, Erez.
Erez. I suddenly feel so conscious about my accent.
Yeah.
Devyani Sharma and Erez Levon have run a massive research project on how accent bias plays out at work.
I think the reality is that accent still matters. In the research that we've done, we've really shown that the same hierarchy that existed 50 years ago, we're finding exactly the same hierarchy today. So what we found is that in law firms, London working class accents were being judged as significantly less competent for a job as a junior solicitor, even when their answer was exactly the same as somebody who spoke with a received pronunciation and RP accent. And even if you get the job in the law firm, we've had, for example, certain lawyers say to us, well, you know, if they have this accent or that accent, you know, I'll hire them, but I would never put them in front of a client. They can just do back office work.
We did also find an ethnicity effect. So there was a kind of intersection of ethnicity and class. Young black men were the lowest rated job candidate of all the voices that we had recorded.
I know a young man called Chris. He's from Hull. He thinks he sounds stupid, and he is very self-aware about his accent. And he looks at YouTube videos, he practices specific words. Is he right to be concerned if he wants to, for instance, become a civil servant?
Even though I fully understand why he's thinking about, say, voice coaching and accent modification, I'm very wary about it precisely because of the cognitive pressure that this puts people under. It's very difficult to change your accent.
What sort of advice should I be giving Chris about how we should think about his accent?
So there's the reality, which I completely agree is there. there's a risk for speakers of certain accents that they'll have more difficulty making it than someone with an RP accent. But we try and separate that from the worry, because there is a problem where worrying too much about that effect can undermine other factors that will serve them well. So if they have the expertise and if they speak confidently, we really showed that listeners don't rely as much on their biases about accent. They'll actually start listening to what you're saying.
Good morning, Mr. Alsop.
Hi, Mr. Barker. How are you?
Pretty well, thank you.
Very good.
How's money with you today?
Well, it's going to be short again, I think.
The RP accent has never been hard to find in London's financial centre.
I've just taken £1 million from the Clydesdale at 9.25 overnight.
A 2020 report estimated 9 in 10 senior roles in financial services were held by people from privileged backgrounds. Some graduate schemes at top city employers offer starting salaries of over £50,000 a year. But how do you get on one?
I grew up in a council estate in Camden. It's called the Regent's Park Estate. I attended a school about a year ago. It was from Sky News. It was like reported one of the worst secondary schools in the country.
Adnan is from a Bengali working class background. His dad was a hotel porter.
In my secondary school, just over 50% failed the GCSEs, so they had no qualifications, nothing. You don't really see our type of people getting into like top professional jobs.
Despite this, Adnan has made it to Leeds, one of Britain's elite Russell Group universities. And he's on course for a 2-1. He's funding his studies by working in security and wants to get into the city when he graduates.
My biggest fear is not getting that opportunity into finance because it's just way too competitive. You can clearly see they're looking for like a well-dressed person, someone who's maybe like, from a high-class background, maybe, from a white class, I guess. The sad thing is that even though you worked so hard, there's always going to be a barrier.
Around the time I met him, a TV drama came out about some graduates in Adnan's dream career at an investment bank.
Graduates are our capital. And while it's my pleasure to congratulate you on this placement, the work to stay here starts now.
It was written by a couple of ex-bankers who were educated at private school in Oxford. I wondered if their insights into class in the city might help Adnan.
You can be on this sort of conveyor belt from independent school with loads of private tutors around you, and then 3 years at Oxbridge where you actually learn the art of rhetoric and you learn the polish, man, you learn how to bullshit, and then you find yourself through peer pressure and, again, more training and circumstance into these jobs which, sometimes you're qualified for and sometimes you're underqualified for.
What did you see in terms of mediocre posh people getting on?
Look at me getting a job in the bank.
But is the flip side of mediocre posh people getting jobs that they don't really deserve that a lot of brilliant working class people get unfairly judged?
Look, I mean, me and Mick, we've operated and written the show from the point of view of thinking that the whole system is truly rigged.
How does an old Etonian end up pals with a lad from the pit? How do you expect to sell financial products if you sound like a miner?
Our college was a melting pot.
In terms of the localised structure of where I was working, I would say that the majority of the managing directors looked, sound, dressed almost identically, actually.
And that was a kind of public school kind of...
Public school, Hermes tie, holiday in the same places, weekend in the same places. It was almost totally homogenous.
There is this central tension in all questions of social mobility, which is like, if you're trying to help people from the bottom end of the ladder get to the top, do you change them in order to kind of work the system, or do you try and change the system?
For me, the idea of changing the system is so fanciful as to be like almost not worth talking about. So it's almost about how you try and rig the players within it to be successful within it. Polishing the people up, or whatever phrase you want, that's a horrible phrase, but to be successful within it.
How you doing, mate?
Good, mate. Long time, man.
It was a few months before Adnan's graduation, and after lots of unsuccessful applications, he had some news. So tell me about this job interview that you got. What is it for?
So it's, I'm going to go for the insurance broking firm. So it's a specialty role where I'll be a broker within Lloyd's of London.
What sort of contact have you had already? Have they been in touch with you? They phoned you or anything like that?
I get a phone call to arrange the date, and when I picked up, I heard the most poshest voice. It was so posh that, you know, I was saying words that I would never use. It just naturally just came out.
So what were you saying in response that you wouldn't usually say?
I used the word like delighted. That I would never use. I don't know.
Did you say I would be delighted?
I'll never say that. But
yeah, you felt you needed to do that.
Yeah, I don't know.
So do you have any connections to that firm? Or do you know anyone who works there or anywhere?
Nothing at all.
So you're going in totally cold?
Yeah.
Without a network of his own, I thought it might be useful if I got Adnan some advice.
Delighted to meet you both.
Rupert Wesson is a coach with Debrett's, a company that specialises in professional coaching and an understanding of Britain's elite.
The reason I wanted to set this up is because I relate to some of the difficulties he's having, because you've done, what, nearly 100 job applications?
Yeah, pretty much, around that number.
Keep getting to the final stage very regularly, but can't quite get over the line.
Yep.
And I just wondered whether or not you could offer some advice, basically.
Great, I'd be delighted to do that.
I'm going to leave you guys to it. I'm going to step aside. Is that all right?
Wonderful. Cheers. Let's set up the chairs either side of the desk, as it would be for an interview.
Another pathway is insider coaching. This is when individuals from non-elite backgrounds actually had a friend or a teacher or a professor or someone who was a cultural insider to elite worlds who could actually give them one-on-one coaching of how to present yourself in the interview, how to actually break into this world.
So what is it that interests you about working here at Highgate Finance?
The core value of team working for me is very, very personal, and I really enjoy working with people. So that's one of the elements what I look for within a company.
So what I'm picking up from that is that your body language is good. You're a little bit stiff, a bit open, and what you'll find is that by doing things such as relaxing your body consciously, slowing the pace down, what you do is you relax yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You actually hack your own system.
Chaps, I brought you some tea. I know my place.
Fantastic, thank you.
I joined them for a debrief.
What story do you tell in your interviews, in your discussions with people?
I try start off with my background, my upbringing and stuff like that, and how I had to take as much opportunities and stuff as possible, because it's very hard, at a young age to build these soft skills. However, sometimes I feel like me talking about my upbringing and stuff like that is like an excuse almost.
So you don't want special treatment because you're from a working class family?
That's the honest truth, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, I respect that. I respect that.
People will often ask questions in interview about your motivation. What has driven you to get yourself into Leeds University?
It always starts off like, when I was young, and then I keep seeing my dad. Before going to school, you hear that alarm click off. And that's like 5 a.m. in the morning. And I'm still in bed, and he's getting up, going to work. That's something I've seen like, okay, yeah, if your dad can do it at this age, when I go to school today, just make sure you learn something.
When you get to interview level, you will find perhaps you'll be sat alongside people who haven't had to work as hard.
Mm-mm.
They've been lucky that they've had a school that's been able to give them the best possible education, and they've got parents that have been able to support them. You haven't had that.
Yeah.
And what you have done is you've made that for yourself.
But I'm very afraid to say these answers, because how do I know if they care about this stuff?
They have to care, because this stuff is important. And they want people in their organisation who are driven. That's what you've got.
There was one pathway called caricaturing difference that was a way to highlight and bring to the recruitment processes differences in your background that could be valuable to the firm. We call them in the US rags to riches stories, this idea that I came from nothing and now I'm here in front of you. And many people from lower status background want to keep these things private. And so even though this sounds optimistic in that there's an alternative route, at the end of the day, it's still going to involve some emotional labor.
I'm not going to approve any honour for any civil servant in this department who hasn't earned it.
What do you mean, earned it?
I mean, earned it. Done something to deserve it.
But that's unheard of.
The civil service is the heart of the British establishment. It includes the Foreign Office, the Treasury, and the Ministry of Defence. Chris had secured an internship there, and I knew a man who knew a bit about it.
Hello, mate.
Sam. Professor Sam Friedman had been invited in to study the class makeup of the organisation.
What that showed you is that at the sort of lower grades of the civil service, it looks somewhat like Britain does in terms of its socioeconomic makeup. But that changes really rapidly as you go up every grade. And you see this very clear progression gap by class background, so that when you reach the senior civil service, only 18% of those are coming from working class backgrounds. That's compares to about 38% in the population as a whole.
Is one of the things that you've found that if you want to get on, you've got to adopt this sort of equanimity, the disposition of a civil servant, and that tends to be bound up with class associations that are more middle and upper class?
Absolutely, and I think what you find is that some can do it, but they're rare, and it sometimes comes with baggage for them. Sometimes a sense that they feel sort of stuck between two worlds, often a sense that they are kind of performing.
How many people have you met or interviewed who have a strong Hull accent?
Not many, Amol. For example, on that point, what a lot of people were telling me about the relationship between RP and civil service work, particularly policy work, is that there's this perception that speaking a particular kind of RP accent almost is a signal of the kind of objectiveness of your policy analysis, of your ability to present evidence, which again is ridiculous.
I know someone who is doing an internship at the civil service. They're not from a posh background. What advice would you give me to pass on to them for how they might prepare for that internship?
The advice you want to give is, go in, be yourself, call out this kind of nonsense that you might feel a pressure to assimilate to. But that is unrealistic, particularly at an individual level. But I think at the very least, I would say, read this research, get a sense of what you need to do to get ahead. But the most important thing is don't internalize the notion that what you're assimilating to is superior, is probably the advice I would give. We tend to fixate on trying to change the individual. But it's really counterproductive in this case, because often what that means is that you are sort of forcing people to change for what end? That end is often the kind of arbitrary way of being that doesn't have any relationship to productivity or competence or performance.
The sort of discomfort that I feel, the awkwardness in being honest to someone like Chris about the fact that their accent really might hold them back, says something, doesn't it, about how class operates in Britain. But maybe, actually, the real act of kindness and the real way to do something about social mobility is to acknowledge that it does exist, that it is going to hold them back, or at least it might hold them back, and that maybe the real insult is pretending it's not a thing when it is. Because you know, classism is real, and accentism is real. And if you want to do something about them, the first step is acknowledging that they exist, especially with the people who are experiencing it, like Chris.
Hello, is it Pete?
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Amol. How you doing? I'm here to see Chris. How are you?
Yes, man. Come from.
Thank you for having me. Can I just ask you guys about what do you hope, Pete, for this young man? What would you like to see him
To
do?
be very successful. Up to now, I'm amazed what he's done. Especially his reports, he won't make anything. Well, that's proving wrong.
His report said he wouldn't make anything of his life today.
Yes.
What a horrible thing for
And
a
he
teacher to
has.
say.
And I'm very proud of him.
Has his accent changed since
His accent has changed. Can you not tell?
I didn't want to say. I'm glad you said. So, how's his accent changed since? And has it changed since he went to?
It's when
uni?
he moved to York.
Right.
Yeah, and probably more when he went to uni. But yeah, it has changed. He's got posh.
He's got posh, has he?
Well, to us, his accent's more refined. I'll put it like that.
Do you agree with your mum's analysis that you sound posher now than you used to?
I don't think so. Like, I think like maybe I'm not posher. I don't think I sound posher, but then I'm surrounded by people all the time who sound posher than me.
I caught up with Chris one-on-one about what he had coming up.
You've got this diversity and inclusion internship. Yeah, where is it and what's it all about?
Yeah, so it's civil service. It's going to be in Leeds, and there's a department for transport. Sorry. So yeah, it's quite a good opportunity. Hopefully.
When we last met, we talked a lot about your accent. We've done some research from these academics who look at accent, and actually accent bias does exist. There is a hierarchy of accents, and the truth is your accent, which is a Hull accent, is quite low down that hierarchy. Part of their research showed that one of the ways you might overcome the disadvantage that an accent can potentially and often does give people, especially people from regional Britain, which is how most people speak, is one of the ways you can override that is through really confident delivery.
I guess maybe I'd ask a question back to that is, if you're doing all these things, you're confident, you're sitting up straight, and then you've got somebody else who's got all the same credentials as you, they're confident, they're sitting up straight, but then that person speaks differently to you. Which one of you is still going to come out on top?
Because sounding posh and confident is still going to get you ahead of someone who sounds working class and confident.
Yeah.
We also basically talked about how you felt you wouldn't really belong in elite professions, right? Like the civil service. Has that changed at all? I mean, do you feel still this kind of basic outsider status?
But yeah, in terms of careers, I'm definitely worried about it.
I actually went after our last chat to speak to an academic called Sam Friedman, and he's actually done a study about the civil service. So he basically said, if you want to get on in the civil service, you've got to sound a certain way, speak in RP or receive pronunciation. I think that's going to be quite tough for you, if I'm being honest, which I now very much am. What do you make of that analysis?
I sort of stopped myself from changing that as much as I can now, because I think about like sincerity a bit more, trying to actually keep true to myself where I'm from.
Yeah.
Like that's why I maybe stopped watching as many videos like how to change your accent or trying to like pronounce things a little bit better than I did.
His advice was kind of don't sort of almost accept the value system of the people in power. Don't sort of internalize any sort of sense of inferiority or accept the idea that they're kind of superior to you. What do you make of that advice?
I think in a way that gives hope actually, because you don't have to turn into the people who have spoken about in this research. You don't have to take it as just because there's this research you have to change to be successful.
How are you feeling going into this civil service internship?
I feel like I'm just going to approach it with an open mind. I can't, like, even taking that advice then, I can't take it all. If I take that like a chip on my shoulder, I've got no chance.
The law, one of the most elite professions of all.
So few men have the qualities which we in this country expect our High Court judges to have.
At the top of the profession, 65% of senior judges were educated privately, compared with 7% of Britain's population. Being a barrister has been the career path of many political leaders and has been cemented in popular culture with a particular identity for decades.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
Like Bridget Jones's Mr. Darcy.
We've fucked up utterly. Eleanor Heaney and Cafe Regani have come and gone.
Ooh, did the others get interviews?
Actually, nobody got interviews.
So how do you know?
Because I was defending him and I told him not to give any interviews.
I think that everybody has an idea of what they think a barrister is, and I don't often think it's me.
Paige was the first person in her family to go to university.
I grew up in a small village, and it's quite a deprived area, I would say. It's quite a high crime rate and drug usage. A lot of kids go in and out of care.
She's won a scholarship for law school and will soon qualify as a barrister.
I think that for me, it's people from where I'm from often are in the criminal justice system. So I think that it's really important that people from a similar background are representing them.
She's starting to apply for jobs this year.
It is worrying that I might not be the traditional, barrister. Sometimes I think, oh, am I cut out for it? I don't talk like them. I haven't come from where they've come from. But now I've just sort of thought, if you don't try, you don't know.
To become a barrister, once you've got your law degree and bar qualification, you need to be accepted by a chambers for a probationary period called pupillage. There are 13 applicants for every pupillage place. And in 2021, men were more likely than women to get an offer. White candidates did better than ethnic minorities, and middle-class applicants were 1.6 times more likely to get pupillage than those from working-class backgrounds. The Bar Council and Inns of Courts are doing a lot of outreach work and run various campaigns around social mobility. But still, the stats show Paige is right to be worried about not looking and sounding like a traditional barrister.
Just when most Londoners are winding down for the weekend, the younger generation is only now coming to life, to rave.
Footloose! Footloose! Wait, Footloose, get one of those!
I think if it's good, it gets played. If it's not, and it ain't good, then it gets put in the bin. Simple.
Mark Robinson has done it. He became a barrister 2 years ago, after a career in the music industry.
You, a former DJ, you're black and working class. How did you do it?
So, yes, I grew up in care and was later adopted. I was basically physically abused as a baby, and then I was taken into care by the local authority. Yeah, it had its challenges. I didn't do well. I was in secondary school, and in amongst that time, I went to a warehouse party. I got into the music, and it kind of changed my life. At that particular time, I fell in love with music, got on pirate radio, Cool FM, at 18 years old, and things progressed. I started to play around the world.
But why the law? How did you get into the law?
Well, what happened is that, let's just say I had a disagreement with someone, I had an altercation with someone, and then I ended up getting falsely accused of assault. And so I decided that, you know what, I'm going to represent myself. A moment of madness.
But you didn't have any legal training whatsoever when you were representing yourself. How did you find the experience representing yourself?
I Googled what the offence was. I stayed up to about 1:30 in the morning prepping my questions, came back the next day and totally took them apart in the witness box. And at the end of the cross-examination of the complainant, the prosecutor took off his wig, he looked at me, he went like that with his wig and said, "You need to do this for a living." And that was the first inkling I've ever had about becoming a lawyer.
So you've told a story about your unlikeliness and turned a negative into a positive, haven't you?
Everyone has their own unique selling point. I'm a particular way, and I use that to my advantage. And with all the DJing, the BBC, and all my other life experiences, it kind of culminates into one package.
What we found in the research was that some men from working class backgrounds were actually quite comfortable talking about their backgrounds at work, quite comfortable kind of retaining their accents. And actually some said that almost that they'd be able to use that aspect of their identity as part of their brand. What was really interesting was that almost every woman that I interviewed from a working class background mentioned that they actively conceal that background at work. And actually you see much wider as well in the national data, you see a clear double disadvantage in earnings for women from working class backgrounds.
All right, after you.
Thank you.
How you feeling?
I'm feeling all right. I've had a bit of practice.
I was visiting Paige at law school on the day of her mock exam.
Your Honour, I ask that the witness be provided with a copy of his statement.
She was questioning a witness, played by an actor.
Would you say that you were drunk?
No, not at all, no.
And did he start a fight with you?
He most certainly did, yes. Well, I had to have stitches over my right eye. I had extensive bruising to my nose and both eyes.
No further questions, Your Honour. Mr. Russell, if you can remain standing, my learned friend may have some questions for you.
OK, thanks very much.
After the exam, I chatted to Paige about her pupillage applications. She'd already been rejected by 1 Chambers.
I don't know why I didn't get it, because I did ask for feedback, but I think it's because they just weren't the same as me. And I honestly do think it's a bit of luck, because people that I know that have got pupillage, it will just be, oh, he knew someone from Mansfield, or that's what somebody's actually said to me. And that's why, obviously, because everybody that gets to interview is good enough. So it just has to be that little personal thing, what gets you through the door.
That little personal connection,
Exactly.
some relatable experience. When you say that they weren't the same as you, what do you mean? You didn't have that little point of connection with them?
No, they were all white, posh men. I'll be honest. There were 3 of them and they were all white, posh men.
And do you think that, I mean, I imagine people like that are conscious of their own privilege and conscious that they're kind of different. And probably some of them might be well-meaning people that want to give a break to someone who's a young working class woman. But do you think actually that social connection is actually just, it's so important that if you don't have it, you're at a massive disadvantage?
Well, I think the problem can be is that if they take me rather than somebody from a background similar to theirs, it's more of a risk until you get to an interview panel where there might be somebody like you, and then you'll get through the door. But obviously those people are few and far between.
Until you get in and change the system.
Exactly.
I actually found in my research that one pathway through which students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds got into these occupations was through luck. They were matched through an interviewer who they shared a similarity with, whether their interviewer came from a low-income background as well, or they just shared an interest. I call it in my book serendipitous match. That's a fancy academic way of saying luck, right? We actually know that that similarity makes us like the candidate better. We attribute greater worth to individuals who are similar to us.
But I guess one of the things that your research might point out is that if you're from a posher background, the chances of achieving a serendipitous match are much, much higher.
100%. In these elite occupations, because we have most of the interviewers are coming from these higher class backgrounds, your chances of matching with a given interviewer are higher if you similarly come from a higher class background.
I was thinking on the way here, actually, that, you know, who you're interviewed by. Yeah. I mean, like my first interview before I got my internship at this American investment bank, the whole interview was, I'm a huge Liverpool fan, and this guy was an Evertonian, and he was also, I went to a public school, so did he. All we talked about was those two affinity bias, those 2 things that made us very common. Didn't touch on any of my qualifications. I don't think he looked at my CV. Mm-hmm. And then, I mean, he walked out and he's like, you'd be great here.
Yeah, well, I mean, in my interview, we talked about Oxford, like, which we had both been to, and he asked me a maths question, which I think I got wrong. If I remember correctly, and then we just, we talked about people we knew.
Doesn't matter because you went to Oxford.
Exactly. I would say purely because of where we were educated, we were able to just slide in with, I would say, minimal effort into a job that was very, very highly competitive and totally wrong for us on pretty much every level.
That's it, Tony.
Wicked. All right, we'll take a seat then.
I caught up with Adnan to find out whether the coaching had helped him in the interview with the insurance firm.
That advice that Rupert gave the other day about owning your story and really talking about your background, did you manage to talk about that much with these guys or not really?
It was, I remember him asking, you know, what motivates you? And this is the same question Rupert told me. And I just remember when I gave the answer to them, at the end of it, I felt it wasn't a good answer. I just remember him saying like, oh, interesting, but I don't know.
Basically bombed, right? It didn't work.
Yeah.
Did you feel that you had said the wrong thing in that environment?
Yeah, so part of me was like, you know, they're probably not interviewing people around my background, so this answer can be a bit not the suitable thing.
Overall then, how would you sum up your job prospects and your situation right now?
I guess it is tough because, you know, it's like up and down, up and down. You reach the top, you're nearly there, and then you're back down in the bottom, you restart. You have to like adapt, change. You know, the higher you climb, adapt, change. You have to basically become them in a way, and it's hard to build that connection, and while having that genuine side of yourself, you know, it gets really, really tiring. But yeah, it's just have to keep going now.
Have to keep going. But basically, you haven't got a job right now, and you need some money. Mate, I know, man. I know. It'll happen. It will happen.
I was in London's legal heartland, where aspiring barristers who have passed their qualifications are welcomed into the profession by one of the Inns of Court.
Paige!
Hello, nice to see you again.
How you doing?
Paige had travelled to London with her family for her call to the bar ceremony.
First of all, congratulations. Isn't it amazing?
Yeah, brilliant.
What is actually happening today? What does today mean in terms of the Paige journey?
So I'm being called to the bar officially. It means that I can call myself a barrister.
Wow, amazing. Yeah. And Sarah, how do you feel about what Paige is saying about her mate? Ecstatic.
Ecstatic.
Yeah.
She's capable. I've always told her she's capable, right from the A-levels.
If I was a judge, I'd be absolutely terrified of her. I've seen her in a mock trial. She's terrified. Absolutely terrified. But now it's celebration time, right? Congratulations.
The ceremony was attended by some of the country's top judges and lawyers.
Student members of the Inner Temple, being called to the profession of barrister, you have declared that for as long as you remain a barrister, you will solemnly use your knowledge and skills in keeping with the principles of the profession's ethics. Paige Tugby, Bachelor of Laws, University of Nottingham, proposed by Master Kabir Sheikh on behalf of Master Joyce.
Master Treasurer, I move her call.
It was a huge moment for Paige and her family.
She's done it, she's a barrister.
But while she had officially qualified to work as a barrister, she hadn't secured pupillage yet.
Even today, a barrister approached me and said, oh, I think you'll be all right, but I can tell from how you talk, you come from a certain background.
Yes.
What? So how do people know that before
said that
I've
to you
even...
today?
Yeah, somebody said that to us. And I think I talk all right from where I'm from.
You feel like this is an environment where there's still a lot of class-based prejudice?
Well, there is. And anybody that says that there isn't is lying. Anybody that says they're doing all that they can for diversity is lying.
I knew what Paige meant because people in the legal world have been incredibly keen to tell me that diversity really matters for the law. But the evidence is that the prospects for people like her are still fairly poor. And I certainly got the impression that if she wants to meet someone on an interview panel that's got, she's got something in common with, she's going to be waiting for a long time. And I'm starting to realise why Lauren said that a lot of these pathways are out of our control.
I've met quite a few of you before, but for those of you who don't know me, I'm Liam and I'm a programme manager at Upreach.
I'd heard about a charity that is having some success.
Really what we try and do in the workshops is hopefully give you a bit of an insight into the 10 skill areas that we talk about quite a lot. We're going to focus a little bit on personal branding, then we're going to do some public speaking stuff, and then we're going to focus on telephone and video interviews.
Upreach invites working class students to sign up for an intensive programme of career support. The charity claims students who have been through its programme are 11% more likely to land elite jobs than their peers from similar backgrounds.
One of the most important things around branding is being able to sell yourself to a person. It's in an interview, whether it's in a networking event. So I want you to kind of, without any preparation, to the person next to you, give a bit of an accurate background as to what you do and who you are.
Hi everyone, nice to meet you. My name's Seth. I'm at university studying history and politics.
Seth is from a working class background in Somerset.
I heard from Upreach in September of last year, and they had sent an email out through the university that said, do you need any help with getting some soft skills, and do you need any help with applying for applications and things like that?
This is hard.
It is difficult.
It's a really kind of difficult question.
It is.
Yeah.
Normally, like, I really don't know where to start.
I feel like, from my background, you don't usually get much exposure to being able to utilise those qualities. Nobody's going to be able to help me without their help, if that makes sense. So I suppose without even thinking about this in the first place, imagine if we went to a place and actually had to do that.
So today we're going to talk about 3 strategies for effective communication, right? And they're really, really simple.
It's all about like hand gestures, about your eye contact, about like your physicality in the room.
Most of that in those sessions was stuff that I would not have thought about before. And I think it tends to be minor stuff as well that I wouldn't have originally expected to think about.
So if you can all go to whatever part of the room that you need to, film yourself for 2 minutes, responding to the question.
OK, so one time I had to overcome an obstacle is when I was in my first job, and it's sad, isn't it? I got to do twice as much work as everyone else. If I hadn't have signed up to that in the first place, I would not know what to do. It's that class division again, isn't it? You know.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I asked the charity's CEO about their methods.
When we look at the data, those from more affluent backgrounds, particularly private schools, tend to score higher in teamwork, leadership, career knowledge, application skills, but lower, interestingly enough, in things like grit, resilience and determination, which those from less advantaged backgrounds seem to have in spades. So we try and close those gaps.
How does that intersect with the meaning of the phrase soft skills?
So very, very closely. A lot of the interventions we do, all of them are designed to impact at least one of those things that I mentioned. Communication skills is a really good example, really, really important.
Do you worry that sometimes your workshops leave people newly aware of the areas in which they're deficient up against posher people?
I think it is a concern, but it's only fair that people know the rules of the game that they're trying to play. It would be much worse if we set them up for failure.
It's not listed yet. Matt asked for it to be listed at 9:45 via CVP.
Paige has had another round of interviews, but isn't practicing as a barrister quite yet. She's working at a solicitor's firm.
The work that I'm doing at the moment is slightly different to what you would do as a barrister, because I essentially prepare cases right up until they go to court, and then the barrister takes over. Last year I applied to the bar. I got several interviews, but unfortunately didn't get pupillage. One chamber's told me that if it would have been a different day, then I would have got it, which is always disheartening to hear. I wouldn't say that any of the panellists that interviewed me had a strong, for example, regional accent. I said to him, I don't know, and he said, the prosecution don't know either. So we'll see what happens tomorrow. By working at this solicitor's firm and being, introduced to barristers all the time, there'll be the odd barrister that I meet where, I would say they're from a normal background, they talk a little bit like me, but more so than not, they're definitely from a more privileged background.
And how does that make you feel?
I think that's just the reality of going to the bar. People need to have money behind them or privilege behind them to be able to succeed. I've decided that at the moment I'm going to try and go down the solicitor route. The financial burden, and also probably a confidence thing, that at the moment I wouldn't be planning on going to the bar at this time.
It's no small achievement if Paige becomes a solicitor, but after all the investment of time, energy and money, it was sad not to see her land pupillage. For the working class kids that you and I speak to, Lauren, these pathways, these hacks, or these cheats if you like, they are ways of adding yet more pressure, yet more emotional load on people from working class backgrounds. And quite often my sense is they are ways of asking people who are from poorer backgrounds to change who they are. Do you feel a bit sort of queasy about that?
I feel not just queasy, I feel completely nauseated by the fact that so many of the solutions put the onus on candidates and working class people to change, as opposed to changing a very, very broken system. When I teach my MBA students, I always say, when I give them strategies like this, I preface it with, pardon me while I throw up in my mouth. But these techniques are all things that involve learning the rules of the existing game. And the problem here is not with individuals. The problem is with the game itself. We need a different game.
I've been following these guys for several years now. And it's true that the type of class journey that they're trying to go on, from a working class background to entering into an elite profession, it's just one kind of social mobility, but it's the one that I have always related to. And it's the one that they aspire to. And the truth is, for all the little tricks and techniques that we've been trying, they're not working, are they? And that is pretty demoralizing. And they think that it's because of a prejudice, an ism, if you like, which we don't talk about enough in this country. Classism. And the evidence suggests that they're onto something. And if it's not going to work helping individuals find their way through a game that is rigged, then I'm starting to think maybe we should see if we can change the game. Next time, what does that tell you about how we are or are not going to get broader social change in Britain until you have proper representation at the top table?
And government has the power. If you want to level up, then
pull your biggest lever.
Absolutely.
I just don't think it's sustainable to carry on applying for these sort of great schemes that they have.
This is why I didn't like telling my parents that today I was going to get a phone call.